Most children in America will spend 13 years of their lives enrolled in public schools. They pass from classroom to classroom, from teacher to teacher, and from school to school. But how do we measure the value of the hours and the days they spend in school? Can we make such a measurement? We examine the issue of judging student success today on The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
I'm Ted Williams from Kennedy King College. Joining me today are special guest panelists, Stacey Davis Gates from the Chicago Teachers Union, and from the Renaissance Schools Fund, Philip Hampton. Welcome. Today we are talking about public education, and I want to ask you guys to start off, how do you think we're doing in the area of public education overall? Philip.
Well, obviously, I think we're doing very poor,
Okay.
And not just here in Chicago, but nationally.
Okay.
And if you look at where urban school districts and the kind of challenges that they have, and if you just consider the state money, the federal money that are coming into districts, districts are facing severe cuts all across the country. Schools have been, in many respects, woefully challenged in terms of performance, the resources that they have, so we're in a tough time right now.
I want you to tell me, before, I think probably even a better place to start, because I do want to hear this, but what do you do in the area of education every day for a living?
Well, I am the Director of Government and Community Relations for the Renaissance Schools Fund.
Okay.
And that's not to be complicated with Renaissance 2010.
Okay, and what do you guys do at the school, at the Renaissance School Fund?
At the school fund, it is the arm of givers who pull together resources to support innovation, or in particular, support charter schools.
Okay, and what do you do?
I am a public school educator, have been for the last 12 years.
Okay.
I currently work for CPS.
Okay.
I am also a member of the Chicago Teachers Union, where I chair the Political Action Committee.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And so what is your take on, I mean, I'm asking this question, I kind of know part of the answer, because the reality is that everyone knows that American public education is not what it could be. America has slipped in its rank in terms of national, or actually international standards. At one point we were #1 in the world, now we rank somewhere around number 25 in terms of overall international education. I guess what I would like for you to speak to as someone who's in the classroom every day, what are you seeing in the class? Because everyone is always talking about, students are doing this, that sort of thing. What grade do you teach? What level?
I'm a high school teacher.
Okay.
And this year I'm teaching first and second year high school students.
Okay, and you teach history, is that
And
correct?
I'm a history teacher, world studies, and U.S. history this year.
Good.
Yes.
So how are we doing then? What are you seeing on the front lines?
On the front lines, I see a very curious bunch of students who have an abundance of potential. However, I see teachers who are constrained, principals who are constrained by policy that doesn't speak specifically to what we need daily. We have a situation where everyone who works in the school we all deal with the same things. I don't think that there is a fair opposition between principals and teachers. I think we deal with similar things all day long. I would say that our biggest challenge is disseminating a message about what the reality of our day looks like, what it sounds like, and how policy can impact that best.
Okay. So speaking of policy, so let's talk about public policy here for a moment. Obviously, we know we are living in the day and age of No Child Left Behind, or I could make jokes about what other people, people call it. We call it in class sometimes. We joke about that, but the truth is that we live in a culture of testing. And actually, the president was just quoted recently as saying that he actually opposed this focus on testing and wants to try to shift education from strictly testing to some other ways of assessing students, which I think is actually a very encouraging statement on his part. But with No Child Left Behind, and you deal obviously with this in terms of testing, how is this affecting what you do in the classroom every day?
Well, there's a test score always looming around. because testing is not being used to calibrate what our students understand and help us refine our teaching skills per se. The testing is being used to label and to basically destabilize the school, the workforce, and more importantly, the students who need the stability the most. So when we think in terms of No Child Left Behind, it's the boogeyman, because this is something that is being used to penalize instead of something that is there for growth, for movement, and for innovation.
But its goals, they were laudable. The goals were, let's make sure that every child who goes from 4th grade to 5th grade is really at 5th grade level.
Right.
And we've had a problem with that.
Well, what's also laudable is that every student that comes into the classroom has a functioning household where they are requisitely prepared when they enter kindergarten, and they can identify letters, they can identify numbers, they can write their name. So we have to, in some way, account for those who don't come with those skills. And how do we effectively deal in situations whereas students who come with deficiencies in the 1st grade and kindergarten are given an opportunity to grow without the penalty phase.
Okay. So, Philip, you've been involved in the charter school movement. Well, you've been involved in public schools, you've been involved in charter schools, you've been involved in a variety of areas. When it comes to education, you're a former teacher also. So, we're looking at a culture now where schools we're finding failing schools. And many of those failing schools are now being closed down, they're being revamped into charter schools.
Right.
And in some areas of the world or some areas of our culture, that's very popular. And then there's also a lot of backlash about that. And I'd like for you to speak to this issue of charter schools as it deals with affecting issues of achievement or lack thereof with our students.
Well, I think what we need to do is really consider that charter schools are not the answer, it is a answer. And it should be one answer in a toolbox of potential solutions to what we're facing. Okay. We can agree that because of this unfunded mandate, No Child Left Behind, it has produced this climate, this lightning rod issue where everyone has to almost teach a test. And when you couple that with the resources that have been depleted from a school district, coming from communities where resources are depleted, it should be no surprise that we have a lot of failure as defined by the unfunded mandate. Yeah. So considering that...
I'm sorry, if I could stop you for a second, because I do want to get to the question of how we measure this failure. How are we measuring this failure? I mean, what are we suggesting? Are we saying that the students are not reading at the correct levels? Are we saying that they're not writing at the correct level? What are we measuring? I think I'd like to speak to that.
Well, in my opinion, one of the positive things that came out of No Child Left Behind was trying to get at a discussion where you could set a measure that would be agreed upon, some national measure where you can at least develop a baseline to look at performance, because school performance is important. Testing should not be the end all, but for us as professionals, as we look for our children to grow and to be able to demonstrate their abilities, we recognize they're going to face testing. So it has to be a part of, but not the end-all solution. So considering that, I think that what charters have done, because they have the ability to do some of the simple things that we know that work, but because of, for example, expanding school days, having longer time at tasks, most teachers would want that, and they recognize what that would bring to the performance of young people. But because we're in such a deficit...
Actually, I have to ask you a question.
Yes,
now, you're saying that most teachers are, and I don't know the answer to this, so you can tell me, most teachers are in favor of longer school days, longer school years, that sort of thing? I mean, you know, you with the teachers union, are you guys, is that the kind of thing? And maybe, do we know the answer to that?
We don't know the answer to that specifically. Teachers are in favor of teaching and ensuring that our students achieve. We are completely in favor of that. What we're not in favor of is this false parallel or this linear relationship between student achievement and test scores. I think that's the more profound statement to make, because we do know that you start school in September and maybe you're done in June, or maybe you're on a year-round schedule. But learning is an active relational activity. So one test either in the middle or the end of the school year doesn't give you the truest indication of that student's performance during the year. So we spend an inordinate amount of time preparing for these tests. We spend an inordinate amount of money purchasing these tests and buying materials to prepare for them. When what I find, particularly when they get to the high school level, is that they're looking for a multiple choice question to answer, and they're not available to have a critical discussion or to analyze a text or to provide some type of narrative that connects history to our present day situation.
Yeah. It's interesting because we always are looking at looking at Asian cultures a lot to see what they're doing in education. And in China, the students who are entering into college, they take this test. And it's typically like a 9-hour test that they take in order to get into college. And they have found that students have been cheating on this test. There's such a high level of anxiety that precedes taking the test. And I think that our culture has looked in a lot of ways at some of the things that are working in other countries, but some things that are not working in other countries have probably adopted those models. And I would imagine that in many ways that testing culture is not necessarily something that we've created, but we've looked, and I don't know that it's had I think the cultural and holistic educational impact that we're looking for, but we look at other places and we say, well, they're doing it, so we need to do it also.
What I find about this new incarnation of reform and those either for it or against it, we all want the same thing. We want students to learn. We disagree about the fundamentals of it, but at the core, we are all in it because we want students to learn. There has to be agreement about the types of students that we're dealing with, the environments that they come from, and the reality of our successes. I find that and expedience gives us these false positives that, like you just said, so there is no silver bullet, but that charters do the best job. So let's put all our money behind charters and not deal with the issue. If we go back to Brown v. the Board of Education, the goals of that legislation, or excuse me, that court decision were never realized fully. It speaks in terms of equality, not equity. And that is the fundamental issue that we need to deal with is equity. You can't give me equality if I'm starting 2 steps behind you. You have to give me equity. And so you see legislation like Race to the Top or No Child Left Behind, and those are responses to, well, Brown v. the Board of Education was, a half a century ago. How come we haven't realized this? Well, because we've never dealt with equitable financing, equitable opportunity, equitable infrastructure.
You spoke about this question of throwing money in charter schools, and I know that because this is the work that you do, I have read a variety of studies on this question of whether charter schools are effective, voucher schools are effective. I'd like for you to speak to that, because within the realm of us talking about how we measure success, how are those schools doing compared to traditional public schools?
Well, when you look at charter schools in Chicago in particular, they have performed, the majority have performed very well. Just one statistic is for the high school students, we graduate about 18% more students in high school. But one of the things that I don't want to contribute to is us being traditional versus charter high school. I think something that was said, I agree totally that the inequities, have been long and broad for a number of years. And we cannot dismiss those. But on a personal community level, one of the things that I'm very concerned about, and that's why I support this whole notion of choice, if there is a family or a group of individuals who would like the opportunity to have a different educational experience for their child, and they don't have the money to pay for it, I think they should have that opportunity.